I'm just going to introduce Charles, and then Charles is going to give a keynote. But we'll sit down for a second, Charles, and make yourself at home. Hey, first of all, great to have you here.
Thank you.
And this is really going to be fantastic. I saw Charles up in Seattle in November, and he just gave the most incredible talk. And he's got an updated version of that. I thank all of you for joining us for the final keynote of the 20th Montgomery Summit. I know we're also webcasting around the world, and so good morning in Australia, good evening in Zurich or wherever you might be, and thank you all for joining us over the last couple of days. I've been reflecting over the past few months, and there's some seminal moments over the last 20 years, and I even remember some of them. I have my 20-year pin on. I'm pretty sure I came every year. But we've had some of the world's most promising leaders in tech before they came household names. I was just mentioning to Charles, we hosted the Facebook here 20 years ago in our first year, and Twitter the following year. Evan Spiegel from Snap, George Kurtz from CrowdStrike, Andy Jassy from AWS just when they're coming out. And I feel like we're going to experience another one of those seminal moments now. Sorry to put the pressure on you, Charles, but from Microsoft. Maya and I met him up in Seattle. And when I went to my hometown, Charles lives up the street from where I grew up in Bellevue, Washington, and he was speaking at a summit on intelligent applications hosted by mutual friends at Madrona. And we're just super impressed. And I think we're at an absolute pivotal moment in AI, and every board member, investor, analyst, is wondering what is generative AI and how do I infuse my products and company with this, and with Microsoft being really one of the, if not the largest company in the world, and being at the forefront of this. Charles's point on that, and there's been a great recent article about it in the Wall Street Journal, and you're getting some very well-deserved attention, Charles, and I think it's a very special occasion. So without more, I'll turn it over to you. He's going to speak for probably 45 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and do a quick little bit of Q&A. So thank you, Charles.
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right, my pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, everybody. I will do my best not to disappoint after kind of a very kind introduction. So for this session today, I really wanted to take a chance and talk about this future of intelligent apps, which we think is something that's very quickly and at a much greater scale and much faster pace than we thought, changing a lot of applications across the board. And just for a quick introduction about myself, I lead up a few different areas at Microsoft, like Dynamics 365, which is our CRM, our ERP, CDP, kind of all the three-letter acronyms when it comes to biz apps. Also Power Platform, our low-code, no-code development platform, and some employee experience and workplace workflow improvements like Viva Sales. So I've been in a couple different places at Microsoft, but very much in this app development, app customization, and bespoke application domain for the last couple of years. And I'm on the engineering side. And so I tried to strike a good balance, talking about the right depth and the right high level. Hopefully that really kind of comes across in the talk. So the reason at Microsoft we're really excited about what intelligent applications mean is because it's driving some pretty foundational changes in how solutions are being built and consumed. And the three pillars that we really talk about, one of which I'll go deeper on today, are data, AI, and collaboration. And it's this idea that every single company and every single technology offering and every single organization is going from this transition where historically you had small amounts of data, maybe measured in the terabytes, to now you're talking about petabytes and more for even a medium-sized enterprise. We're going from a data poor to a very data-rich environment, and that requires us to rethink a lot of the solutions that we end up building. The second one is this idea of going from big data, which I love, but I think 10 years ago, big data was the big term that we heard over and over again, to now this world where it's big AI, this transformational new types of AI approaches, enabling all kinds of new scenarios. And last but not least, and we won't talk about this a whole lot, this idea of collaboration being at the heart of most applications, and this idea that we have a lot of data and a lot of AI, but people still make processes and businesses move forward, so you gotta bring them together in an interesting way. And you see things like Figma as a great example of a new way of building a collaborative app. So anyway, three big changes, three big trends, which are fundamentally altering the landscape of applications. And the one which is the most powerful by far right now is this big AI one. And when we talk about this, it's really interesting because it's a disruption of software and technology in a way we really haven't seen in the past. If you think about, Mark Andreessen talked about this idea, software is eating the world, something like 10, 12 years ago, where every industry and every business and every department is being reimagined because of software. The same thing is now happening to software itself because of these AI capabilities. And I'll talk about a little bit more how that's happening. But this is driving an incredible sense of urgency at Microsoft and with many of the companies that we partner with. We think that this is a platform shift on par with things like the move to the cloud or the initial creation of personal computing and operating systems. It fundamentally is going to change the game for basically every technology company out there. And that's why you've probably noticed that Microsoft over the last few months, over the last year, we've had a lot of announcements around AI because it really is the battleground in the future area where so much competition is going to happen. And if we think about kind of what that really means, it means it's a different kind of application, this idea of an intelligent application as something that customers want to consume, that you want to buy, that you want to build, and that you want to use yourself while at work. And the reason they're going to be intelligent is because of these new types of AI, this new era. And we talk about this kind of as an informal term of big AI, but all the AI that existed 3 or 4 years ago in software is pretty far removed from the technology that's changing the software for us right now. You're going from a lot of little custom-built models for every single use case to a few really big models which you use in a lot of general use cases. And this is showing up and actually altering the way us as people will work each and every day, how we make decisions, how we reason over data, how we prepare content. And the reason that the core tech, the core thing that we really talk about and focus on is this idea of foundation models. They are that big AI component. They are what changes the game and changes what's possible. And if we look at what foundation models look like, the big thing I kind of keep going back to when we talk about this internally at Microsoft is this idea of this is not going to be the classic machine learning approach. This is not going to be done the way things were done in the past. It's non-incremental improvement. It's very much a stepwise improvement and shift in terms of how AI and capabilities are being built and used. It's an evolution to much more general purpose AI models. So you can use these models as a single platform. I would say the extreme supermajority of foundation model usage today is probably a single model called GPT-3.5 or its derivatives is basically what's being used broadly. And the third one, which is what has us acting with such urgency, is this idea that foundation models behave a little bit like Moore's law in that every year they're getting 2, 3, 4, 5 times better. And what that means is things which seem impossible today will quickly become possible, and things which are expensive to do, like inference, will quickly become much cheaper. And I'll talk about some good examples that really show that in effect. But this pace where you see compounding improvement is when you have huge disruption, huge reimagination, because what's even possible will have to be rethought pretty quickly. And if we think about kind of how we use them, we increasingly talk about this idea of AI as a platform upon which you can build new applications. And you already can see it. There's this explosion, this Cambrian explosion of new generative AI startups out there right now. And they're using these large foundation models as their platform to go enable sales scenarios, customer service scenarios, marketing scenarios, payroll scenarios, and more. And they're able to very quickly improve and get enhanced. But what they don't do, and this is also something which sometimes can trip up its application in our practice, is it's not a database. So it doesn't replace the need for relational data stores. You still need those. You still need operational and analytical data stores. It's not a computation engine. These things up to now aren't very good at math, but who knows in a couple of years. It's not a good way to actually do real-time logic in a lot of cases, so you still have a need to write code. And it's not the same way that software development happened in the past, particularly as it relates to intelligent or machine learning applications. So that's kind of what foundation models are all about. And one of the best examples of it, and by far probably the most broadly aware thing, is something called large language models, or LLMs. And these are incredible because they're scaled with a astonishingly large number of parameters and an incredible amount of sample data. And with just some very slight tuning and prompt engineering, you're able to make them do a lot of purpose-built cases without having to go retrain the model. And I would guess there's probably 2,000 or 3,000 startups which are funded right now by venture capital firms, which more or less just use an out-of-the-box large language model just applied to common workflows and tasks. And the best example of this, I think probably the best thing to really propel broad awareness of the potential of foundation models is ChatGPT. I think if I were to poll, I think 95% of people would raise their hand of having used or seen or played with it in the room. It's really brought the power of these capabilities to the fore and made it very aware broadly. The example I always give is I remember on a Saturday a couple weeks ago, or maybe a couple months ago, my dad texted me saying, hey, is this ChatGPT thing real? Can it really help me get my job done? And that's when I know it's gone really mainstream before it kind of showed up all over the place. And I mean, what's great about ChatGPT is it shows a lot of those traits that I talked about in action. ChatGPT passes the bar exam, passes the MBA exam, passes the AP Bio exam, passes the medical license exam. It wasn't trained or tuned to do any of those things. The same model was able to do all of those things and actually do as well as a typical human in those very specific narrow use cases. That idea of a single general model being used in lots of different domains is what's new. And we see entire branches of research and entire branches of machine learning being pruned and thrown away right now because of that fact. These generalizable, reusable models enable pretty astonishing outcomes. And ChatGPT is, think of that as like version 0.1, the hello world, the beginning of what these things are going to be able to do over the next couple of years. Now, it's not just buzziness in terms of the tech space, because that's always a danger on the west coast of the US, say. It's something that really has started to permeate typical enterprise as well. There's a great stat here. About 90% of basically corporate executives in typical enterprise across industry and country said that AI is going to be a critical part of their future and their strategy from a digital and technology perspective. So very much a buzzy, exciting startup world, but also corporate transformation, reimagination. And we have just as many conversations with CIOs of classic Fortune 500 companies as we do with startup founders and CEOs about this technology right now. Now, taking a step back, kind of out of the marketing speak, I want to do a little bit of a technical kind of overview and some of the things to kind of highlight what this coming to life in a lot of cases. So folks may have heard of things like DALL-E or stable diffusion, but the same idea of, say, text generation like in ChatGPT, but also image generation. And if you think about kind of DALL-E as it was introduced in January 2021, here's an example of a prompt in the generated images around a golden retriever in the style of a starry night. This was in 2021, which was about 2 years ago, but might as well be 200 years ago as it relates to the pace of this stuff. And even DALL-E 2, which came out a year later in stable diffusion, which I think has been even more impressive in what it's been able to kind of evolve to with its ecosystem, delivers dramatically enhanced and a lot more stylistically interesting images with fairly complex prompts. If you go to it and you say, ask for teddy bears mixing sparkling chemicals as mad scientists as digital art, those are some pretty great images. And if you think about a whole class of content that you would use in presentations or papers or websites or marketing copy can now be built with these types of tools and technologies in a very short period of time. And then that was just 1 year of progress, and that builds on a pretty rapid acceleration that happens because of that scaling characteristic, that property I talked about earlier, where it's like Moore's law, where it's just getting better and better and better and better very quickly. And once you have something as a scaling problem, which means if you double the compute, you double the data, you double the training time, you can make it twice or thrice as good, you start to get very fast, very dramatic enhancements. And you can kind of see the evolution as the parameters increase for this single text prompt, how it went from a fuzzy, not stylistically aligned image when it's 350 million parameters to the left to a 20 billion, it's something that's actually very convincing and I think certainly better than anything I could create if I were to be given this prompt. And this idea If you think about just going by 7, whatever that is, 7.5 times or 7 times more parameters to get that much better, what about when it's 70 times better or 700? And that's not something that happens in a linear way, that's something that we're seeing happening in a compounding growth way. And this makes it very easy to be a skeptic or a pessimist to a degree about this technology, because you can look at the point today and see all its limitations. But when you have a compounding line, what you don't realize is there's so much potential that's going to come very quickly, and so many of those limitations will go away. And one of the things that we've kind of been working on in a lot of the big breakthroughs of people far smarter than me on this technology is this idea. We have a lot of data in the world, like the entire internet, or all images that Getty Images owns, plus all public domain images. But the big problem is it's not labeled data. So the big transformation, the big evolution has been this idea of self-supervised learning. And for folks that kind of looked at the details of something like GPT, it's like, how can it seem so intelligent when it's just predicting the next word in a sequence of words? That's kind of a beautiful mystery of the model. But the way you kind of get there is just by converting a bunch of known data, like say sentences on the internet, Twitter posts, Reddit posts, New York Times articles, Wall Street Journal articles, and you actually go and you can say, take out words from real sentences, and then treat those as unlabeled and then labeled data sets, which you feed back into the model. And this masking-based approach allows us to convert a lot of unlabeled, unstructured data into effectively labeled structured data for purposes of self-supervised learning. And this has been kind of a simple yet very elegant way to turbocharge so much of the capabilities of these foundation models. So a lot of, I think, great science, and I apologize for trying to fit this into like 30 seconds, but it's a good idea to show something as simple as this can manifest as something as compelling as technology like ChatGPT at the end of the day. So that's kind of a high-level view of a lot of the domain, a lot of the things in play. And I love this analogy because I am AP bio nerd from growing up. But if folks have ever heard like this idea of a phylogenetic tree, which is this pretty amazing thing where you can walk back through the history of animals to understand when through evolution you actually have branches and forks based on the capabilities. And if you go back to like when vertebrae first evolved versus when bony skeletons evolved versus forelimbs versus an amniotic egg versus hair and so on, you can actually see where all these different species and animals split apart. But for any of these animals, if you start walking back up the tree, you find a point where it reconverges. Kind of one of the coolest things out there. What we're seeing, and the analogy that I like to use a lot, is this idea of the phylogenetic tree of these foundation models. So it's less that you start from scratch as you continue to tune and optimize these models, but instead you derive and evolve from a well-known strong model. So if I give a very real example of, say, how we have used this capability at Microsoft over the last couple of years, is if you take GPT-3 or 3.5, which is like DaVinci Text 2, and you go and you track, on top of that, we did something called Codex together between OpenAI and Microsoft, where you actually train it on programming languages and code capabilities, which it's derived from that, but it's better at predicting code, and that shows up in a bunch of products. We then take, say, that model, and we do some tuning on top of it to prepare it for sales workflows or customer service workflows or legal document workflows. They're still derivative of that original model and just really like offshoots of it, but you can always trace back to the source material. And this approach has been very game-changing in how we build and what we can do when it comes to technology and products. The reason it's game-changing is if you want to go create a new application for, say, natural language, you don't go train a model from scratch. You don't go build your own model. You take one of these ancestor hero models and you tune it, which means you hire different people, have different technology and different tech stacks. And if you layer on stuff like reinforcement learning with human feedback, and you even get further tuning and evolution, but you can track back that phylogenetic tree to understand where it all comes from. So in Microsoft, we may have 100+ different GPT-3.5 derived models that we use in production, in lots of different use cases, but they all root back to that single ancestor. And this is, again, a very different way of building, a very different way of preparing products over time. Now, if we kind of look at that in more practice, and where we see these models will actually show up, say that's the science, the platform, the technology, where do these models actually show up? The thing we're very interested in is this idea of co-pilots. AI co-pilots for every role, for everyone, to help you do your job better. And it's a co-pilot, not an autopilot. The technology is amazing, but in general purpose use cases, not able to fully replicate and replace human decision-making and judgment. But it can turbocharge and accelerate what people can do. We think there are going to be co-pilots all over the place, which are your AI collaborator, your assistant, helps you generate content, helps you brainstorm ideas, help you prepare presentations, help you evolve your thinking, do research, complete tasks, and even automate cognitive tasks, like making some simple decisions or reading through and summarizing content or summarizing lots of content into a single message or view. Co-pilots will be there with us along the way. And we think that co-pilots more or less are going to be the primary productization in the near term of these AI capabilities, because the value is so quickly realized. Who wouldn't want software which is AI powered and makes them 20% more productive? Who wouldn't want software that could remove the 20% of the job that you hate the most? The triaging emails, the copying data between systems, the preparing the 18th different version of a presentation. That is a perfect place for the co-pilot. And just like if you're flying a plane and you have two pilots, one isn't taking a nap in the back when you land the plane, they both have their hands on the joystick, you still have a human and co-pilot working together, human in control. But today you can deliver a lot of impact. And I think creativity around this is what's going to surprise a lot of us in terms of how quickly workflow and process and what you do in your job in a very short period of time. And what's exciting about this is that we've tested this to a degree with success at Microsoft. We announced something called GitHub Copilot, which is this idea of your AI pair programmer, which helps with code completion and code generation. And there's been some pretty amazing impact and metrics around what it does to developer productivity. We'll share some more of that publicly actually next week, where we'll talk about how big of an impact that can have for developers. And just like we do that for developers, we increasingly think that there's a role to have a co-pilot in every single line of business, every single department, in sales. And these are just a list of a bunch of Microsoft products, and you don't have to memorize all the logos or anything like that. But it just shows we really think, take this entire palette of products, which represents a large set of businesses for Microsoft. Every single one of these businesses will be disrupted and reimagined because of this idea of the co-pilot. Every single one needs to have a co-pilot, just like GitHub Copilot does for developers, but for sales, customer service, marketing, finance, HR, supply chain operations, and more. And if we kind of look at that, I'm super excited, given just the timing of this conference, because I can now talk about this because it's something we've been working on for a while at Microsoft, this idea of what we call the Dynamics 365 Copilot. And it's this idea of a generative AI assistant to go help you do your common CRM and ERP tasks. And this co-pilot makes it so you can, whether you're a manager or someone who is on the front line selling a product or doing customer support, you can be more efficient. And it's one of those things where it's really good to see in practice. So kind of like if we go look at what that looks like from a product perspective, I have a short demo video which shows in our product just this co-pilot appearing, and you can start to see how you can get 15-20% productivity improvement once you have this AI deployed.
Copilot in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Customer Service revolutionizes the support experience with generative AI. It empowers agents to easily leverage company knowledge, sources, and quickly generate optimized responses for customers in a single click. Copilot makes agents more productive and helps them deliver better customer experiences. Let's look at an example from Microsoft Azure, which uses Dynamics 365 Customer Service and has thousands of support engineers handling millions of requests every year. Ivan is a support agent at Microsoft. He answers complex customer questions on Azure sent via email. On his agent desktop, he sees the inbox to the left of the screen, and in the center, he can see all the relevant information and timeline for the case he is working on. He notices an email received from Claudia asking about a configuration issue with their Azure Kubernetes service cluster. Usually, responding to this kind of complex issue would take Ivan several minutes. He would spend time searching through multiple knowledge articles, finding the relevant section that connects with the customer's specific issue, and then writing up a response to the customer. Today, he is using Copilot. Copilot expands on the right side of his screen and helps him draft the perfect reply with just one click using generative AI. He can even provide custom prompts for the most complex cases. Copilot saves him time and helps deliver high-quality service. Copilot knows all of the context from trusted websites and Azure's internal data, including customer name and relevant knowledge articles. So Ivan doesn't have to spend time searching or typing. Now, he just has to review the response. The draft looks great, and with one click, he copies it into the email editor and sends it out, feeling confident that his customer is receiving the prompt, friendly service they deserve. Soon after, Ivan sees an incoming chat from another customer, Diane. The chat appears on the left side of his screen. In the middle, he has the relevant information for his customer. And on the right, Copilot is ready to help him. The Power Virtual Agents bot has already summarized that the customer is having trouble logging into their Visual Studio account. This helps him get a jump start on this conversation. Rather than searching on his own, he turns to Copilot for help, which uses generative AI to surface the latest information that is typically found across Azure's vast set of internal documents, including previously resolved case notes and published knowledge articles. Having already saved time researching, Ivan is able to follow up quickly with the customer to gather the right details needed to investigate. With the error code in hand, he checks in with Copilot one more time. In a single click, Copilot summarizes the customer issue from the live chat conversation and drafts a response that he can share. It appears the document which Copilot used to formulate this response is the right one, but Ivan knows he can always click through the source links to verify or make any edits to the response if he needs to. Satisfied, he decides to send it to the customer. This interaction shows the true power of Copilot.
And I'd say you don't have to know a lot about the Microsoft ecosystem to kind of grok what's happening there, but really there's there's three stages of the transformation that we see happening. Today, before AI copilots, largely it's a support agent or a customer support service agent talking to a customer, and they're responsible for doing research, for making decisions, for typing responses, to looking up data. And with the copilot, what we're seeing instead is that there's a human that reviews and edited content, but research, knowledge management, knowledge generation, and even replies are being created by that AI copilot. And if you think about what that can do for productivity in a way which all historical AI technologies could not, is it can dramatically accelerate and change the way people actually work. And that's where we are right now. Like this year in 2023, this idea of a support agent with an AI copilot at their side. The next wave, coming over the next 3 to 5 years, is this idea where increasingly a support agent is not even necessarily directly interacting, but instead is effectively supervising many AI agents who are helping manage the responses and replies from customers. Again, you still have human judgment and human in the loop and human decision making, but you're able to go pull through all of this capabilities to just reduce costs and improve experience. And kind of those three things of improve employee experience, improve customer experience, and improve operational efficiency is what's going to drive the rapid adoption of AI. And unlike a lot of big technology shifts in the past, like the move to the cloud, which really was a hosting infrastructure business model shift, but didn't fundamentally change how you did things like word processing or use spreadsheets, the shift to these generative AI capabilities will actually fundamentally change the workflows that people do. What you actually do in your job will be different. It just won't be hosted in a different place. So, and that's something that we think really goes across the board. We also have a set of capabilities inside of sales workflows where it's the same idea, where from inside of Outlook, I'm able to quickly generate emails, replies, meeting summaries from this Copilot. Just take away the monotony and the drudgery that a seller does and let a seller stay focused on closing deals and building relationships with the customer. And this type of offering is just 2 of 10 different things that we have at Microsoft and probably 10,000 things which exist in the free market. And if we think about what this is going to keep looking like over time, again and again and again, the workflow is going to feel different. The experience is going to be different. And if we kind of skip that for a second, yeah. And then if we look to the future of where we're going, we can see that we're going to a very different way of actual organizing the office and teams and organization. You're going to go from a world where it's all about people working side by side, collaborating one another, to a world where it's people and AI working side by side, collaborating with one another. And this idea where you have lots of humans and they each have their co-pilot and maybe multiple co-pilots which they supervise is a different way of working, a different way of investing, a different way of propelling forward. And this is why, if we kind of go back to the beginning of the presentation where we talked about this being a huge seismic shift where AI is eating software and AI is changing what gets built and how people buy and how people use software, it's because of this fact. You're changing the workflow, you're changing the experience, you're changing team composition. That does not happen very often. Really, if we kind of go back through the history books of software, personal compute, the emergence and the broad rollout of personal computers is probably the only equivalent in terms of fundamentally changing the way we work. Everything in between has been much smaller level at the workplace. So that's a kind of a big deal in terms of the solutions that get built, get created. And that's kind of why we have also a lot of, even more further back in history, a metaphor of this idea of this industrial revolution at the office. And this is important. It turns out that AI is going to change and disrupt a lot more of office and knowledge work, more so than it's going to change things like driving around cars and trucks. And just like how manufacturing really changed because of these types of innovations and revolutions in the past, AI copilots can do the same thing for cognitive work at the office. And some great stats from IDC that talk about this, where just 3 years from now, 85% of enterprises, so enterprises, not necessarily tech-leaning companies, enterprises will have human expertise and AI mixed together for a 25% more productivity boost. To put that into perspective, 25% productivity boost, that's like the personal computer and internet combined level of productivity boost at the workplace. A lot more than what we've seen in a lot of other big technology shifts. So big opportunity and a very quick evolving and a very unknown domain. But one thing we are fairly confident about all of this is that we're going to have to rethink and retool all the applications that we build. And what does that mean? It means we have a huge amount of work to do. Over 500 million new apps in the next couple of years need to be rebuilt as intelligent apps. And we have millions and millions of developers short in terms of the workforce and the labor force to go build these solutions. So huge demand, bigger than it's even been in the last 10 years, over the next 10 years for digital solutions and development, and an even worse and growing gap in the labor force. And in the past, there's really had this idea that you can only develop solutions with coders, with professional developers. But we really think this AI is going to make it so anyone and everyone will be able to participate. They won't build everything, every type of app, every type of solution, but everyone will be able to participate in the construction and development of applications. And if you think about how we're going to do that, it's not going to be this. We're not going to go teach everybody how to write code. We've tried. Doesn't work. Instead, we're going to focus on reaching everyone with low-code, no-code tools. And for folks that don't know what the heck that means, because it is a weird term, but basically it's this idea of development through dragging and dropping, clicking the mouse, not writing code. And if you can say use PowerPoint and Excel, then you can use these low-code tools to develop. Excel is probably the most widely used database, the most widely used data analytics, most widely used machine learning platform in the world. And it's not because it necessarily has the most power, it's because it's the most accessible. And AI is going to take that and turbocharge it in a way which we didn't even think was possible a couple years ago. And we really think by reaching everyone with low code, you can actually enable all parts of a company to participate in development of these solutions. Business users, in the finance department, the legal department, the HR department, and so on. IT professionals and admins who maybe don't write code but are technical, as well as pro developers, will all participate. And at Microsoft, we kind of have a collection of products focused on this. It's called the Power Platform, no-code, low-code offerings, Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agent, Power Pages, to help people from data analytics all the way to web and mobile application development to robotic process automation, so that anyone can participate in these things. And as an example, Power Platform, if it were a programming language, would be the most used programming language in the world. More monthly active developers on Power Platform than any individual coding language, despite being just a couple years old. So very broad adoption because it empowers everyone. And everything we've done in the past with Power Platform is kind of being thrown to the side because of this generative AI transformation and revolution. And that is why you can see stats like this from Gartner, where 65% of enterprise application development by 2024 will be done with these low-code, no-code tools. So in the enterprise, in the core energy and retail and transportation and food and agriculture, all of that, the majority of development, in fact, I'd say the super majority of development will be done with these low-code, no-code tools in just 12, 18 months' time. And if we think about what these AI tools enable, one of the things which wasn't obvious to us in the beginning, but kind of took some learning to figure out, is that these large language models, these foundation models, are going to usher in a completely new era of development. And this idea of being able to talk to your computer the way you talk to another human and have the computer do what you actually want it to do is one of the incredibly powerful things of the co-pilots and low-code, no-code development. And what we've really pushed on with this idea is, how do we expand the audience of people who can be a developer? In the past, Excel, using VLOOKUP or match and those types of more advanced Excel formulas and pivot tables, that was something that most business users couldn't do. But just about every business user, everyone in the world, could open Word and start writing a sentence. What if we made it so that development was much like opening up a word processor and writing a sentence? And that's what really we think of no code. So even easier than drag and drop and clicks and those things. And one of the big things that we've released last year is this idea with Power Automate, where you're able to have a co-pilot for automation where you can actually describe what you want to automate across over 900 different systems, and it will automatically build the automation for you without you having to worry about data integration, error handling, parameter passing, any of that. It'll build it for you. And since we've released this capability in Power Automate, we've seen two amazing things. For people that use the natural language interface, they're able to build solutions 50% faster than those that do not, even for experts. By using this natural language experience, you're able to turbocharge development and democratize development of automation solutions. And the solutions that are built are 70% more likely to run successfully. So easier, faster, more reliable. It's not every day where you see the intersection. It certainly is not every day where you see that in the V1. That kind of shows the disruptive potential of this capability. So to kind of show what that actually means in practice, I just have a short demo video just so we can see how the product works for that.
Jonas Barr is a product manager at an apparel company. His organization gave him access to Power Automate and wants him to be more productive, but he's never felt comfortable with all of the capabilities to build a flow from scratch. Luckily, there's a new way for Jonas to get started, and that's to simply describe what he wants in natural English words. So he can come in here and he can type, when I get new emails, log in Excel. And we automatically see here, there is a nice flow suggested for him. And you can even continue to enhance this flow. And bam, he has a flow here that has a condition, depending on certain situations, it will post a message in Teams. Next, he can use single sign-on to automatically get connected to all his services. And now all he needs to do is pick which location his Excel file is in and which channel he is going to post the new message to inside of Teams. That's it. He's now created a flow that lets him go from email to Excel and sometimes into Teams. Now that Jonas has a flow set up for him, he can continue to enhance and add capabilities to it. For example, he can make sure that this flow only triggers when he gets emails added to the shoe ideas folder, because he doesn't want every email to get added into this Excel workbook. So what we've just seen is with a single sentence, he was able to create a flow that was extremely powerful and useful for his own productivity in a way that he never would have before, because he was able to just use the way that he talks as the starting place to get all of the capabilities of this platform.
And if you think about how many expert systems there are out there in the world where you have to get a lot of training and a lot of understanding the ins and outs of how to query data, to invoke data, to take actions. And what if you could just use natural language to interact with those same systems? As a new user interface is really going to unlock a lot of latent opportunity out there. And from our point of view, this really is just the beginning. I would say this example is just automation, but you can imagine that just about every aspect of work will be rethought this way. And just like how the emergence of spreadsheets made it so every office worker is expected to be able to do basic data analytics and reporting inside of a spreadsheet, we think these new no-code breakthroughs because of natural language will make it so every office user, just as they're expected to be able to use spreadsheets, will be able to automate tasks, build apps, and interrogate data through these tools. And if we kind of go look at what that means like more broadly, like if I were just distill it down, apps are going to look different, and they're going to be built different. And as consumers of as individual consumers of SaaS software and other technology software, what we choose to buy will also be decided differently. So a very big, fast-changing, very exciting period in time. And I think we're all super fortunate to be in the middle of this whirlwind of change and transformation. And I think we're all going to learn a lot, and we're all going to figure out a lot as we go actually see these things start to go mainstream. And that's going to be in terms of what we build, as well as how we even go build our teams and our organizations. So that's all I had prepared to share with you today. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for making it to the end.
Fantastic. Well, let's have a seat. Well, that was terrific. Well, it's all clear. Yeah. Yeah. It's you're at the beginning of the age. John, you captured one slide. What was that? It was the AI will eat software. Software eating the world. AI will eat software. You like that one? Your favorite one? There's some great material there. A couple of years ago, we were talking about 4 to 6% AI adoption, and now it's obviously a lot higher. What are your customers asking? I mean, every major corporation in the world pretty much uses Microsoft, or the Western world, and what are they asking for? What challenges are they facing onboarding this technology?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is if there's this constant evolution of every company says, what does this mean to me? And It's not always obvious, right?
Yeah.
If you're in energy, what does this mean to me? If you're in pharmaceuticals, what does this mean to me? So the most common question that we get right now is just consultation of how do I apply this today and how do I change my approach to the future?
Yeah.
And I think that manifests in terms of how do I organize my teams? Where should I invest my money? Where should I invest my capital to go take advantage of this? And what are the risks for me from a regulatory or from a potential long-term business risk perspective as a result of this? So I think the biggest thing is just discovery and understanding.
Yeah.
But what we recommend everybody to do is just use it in practice, find ways to take advantage of the technology, and then things will reveal themselves pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, that's good. Regulatory, is that about privacy of data? Is that principally with I saw something or some larger banks are banning it because it was just too quick for them, I guess, to digest.
Yeah, so I think there's a few pieces to it. So one of the big items is these models are so hungry for data. because it gets so much better the more data you give it and the more high quality data that you give it. So what you see is a lot of the AI tools out there have terms and conditions where if you give it your data to generate a response, they own the data that's input and the data that's output, which they'll then in turn use to improve their model for all their other customers. That's a problem because if you send a trade secret, like say your quarterly earnings that are going to come and be released publicly in 2 weeks, if you send it to one of these tools, you don't want it coming out in a reply to somebody else who asks, what's the future earnings of JP Morgan? So
here it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't know, is it real or not? You don't know. But so it's like, so there's a data protection aspect which is critical. And I think that will be worked through because that's just a hosting and data provenance guarantee. But then there's also, what does it mean if you use these tools as a doctor or as a lawyer?
Right.
Like
privacy and
and like where it's a highly regulated profession, like can a AI like this actually make recommendations or suggestions during diagnosis? Can it? Should it? Will it?
Yeah. Well, it's the term co-pilot is really the catchphrase here. I was struck when I was up in Seattle that everything Microsoft built 3 years ago has pretty much been thrown out, and you had dozens of teams of dozens of people writing these algorithms, and now you just give a few prompts and it's a lot better. I'd be kind of pissed off if I was that person. Years working on it, but how's your team internally adopting to these tools and whatnot? What are some of the lessons learned from that?
I mean, the first thing is like engineers and product leaders are like kids in a candy store, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, all of a sudden, scenarios you only dreamed of and you never thought possible, like a natural language interface over a knowledge management site, are now possible. And then engineers love it because these foundation models are just an API call away, and they're so general purpose. Even if I have no idea what the heck LLM even stands for, I can integrate it into my app. So devs, product leaders, beyond excited. Then on the machine learning side and the research side, we're figuring it out because it is different. Like I had teams working on natural language models that we would use inside of sales call summarization or sales coaching. And this on day one is just 10 times better. Yeah. So why do that anymore? So repurposing and reevaluating.
Where's the trade-off? I mean, you showed some models there, and you showed the images with 20 or $30 billion data points. And, for a layman, as we look at it, you see these large horizontal models like OpenAI and what Google's trying to do, and yet then you have these specific models for different tasks. We talked about cyber and fraud and where they're maybe better, faster, cheaper because they're looking at a narrow set of data that might be 1 or 2 orders of magnitude smaller. Where's the trade-off between those two, and how's that going to change over time?
Yeah, I mean, like the big thing is I would say that the core foundation models every year get several multiples cheaper and several multiples more capable.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect, and like we already in some cases have like distilled versions of models which we use for certain scenarios because you don't need the full power of GPT-3.5 to summarize a call. You have a distilled version of it. So there are optimizations that will exist and they'll be domain specific. But we think given the large cost and large effort required to build these models and the need for them to be tuned through reinforcement learning over time, you'll start to see convergence and a small number of big players in a given domain.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we think.
And not natural economies of scale.
Yes.
Certainly you have it in the stack. You got, NVIDIA wins, right? Because you got to have the processing, right?
Yep.
And you've got OpenAI, which we're about 80% of the dollars are going to go to. Then you kind of work your way up. I mean, early in our career, we'd always wanted to stay away from the kill zone around Microsoft, right? It was, because he's like, all right, if this is core to Microsoft, I don't want to invest there, right? You just get run over. The same with, lesser extent with Google, because they're kind of harder to predict. But Microsoft always had a reasonably clear roadmap. That's going to be pretty interesting over the next couple of years to see what's kind of, where this goes and where it evolves. I'm sure there's some interesting patterns that are going to develop there. And we'll all be watching that very carefully. But I think the combination of GitHub and Power BI and all that. It's a very powerful combination. It feels like it's more harnessed than ever before. You'd have a suite of Microsoft products, but they're kind of all doing their own thing, and this thing really seems to, work together just extraordinarily well. All right, so shifting gears to some of the emerging opportunities in generative AI. What's going on with Bing in the partnership with OpenAI? I know it's been a bit in the press, so not everyone probably read or understood the articles, but is there anything you'd like to share on that provide some perspectives that public domain, but maybe not fully comprehended?
Yeah, so I'd say I'm on the other side of the company, but it's been amazing to kind of be part of that journey inside the company. That's your consumer versus commercial split. And I would say it's been amazing seeing how people use the new Bing. And it's almost like there's more excitement over it as a curiosity and a source of entertainment as opposed to a source of searching and finding information. And you read these stories of reporters which have kind of interacted with Bing Chat. So if folks haven't seen it, basically think of Bing Chat provides or marries the internet, the searching, the real-time information from the internet with the knowledge and conversational abilities of a ChatGPT-like thing. It's not ChatGPT, but think a ChatGPT-like thing. And what people will talk about is, I talked to it for 3 hours and I kind of got this interesting response. And the thing which is fascinating to me is not the response that may have been interesting. If anybody read about Sydney, I don't know, that's kind of the Sydney story, is kind of amazing.
Right.
But the fact that they talked to it for 3 hours, right? That's kind of I don't go to search engines and search stuff for 3 hours. I don't know about you. And that's kind of the big thing. What I really feel is we're so early in all of this. We really don't even know what the killer app or the killer use cases are. There's a lot of great use cases, a lot of great value, but we're going to find some things that we had no idea to expect.
I remember, I read that, I thought back to Tony when he had Zappos in Las Vegas, and we had one agent who was on the phone with a customer for 11 hours, and I just thought, what the hell are they talking about for 11 hours? I thought of that story. Tony was proud of the story. I thought, how could this possibly be good? But Amazon was always very clever. They'd try different services, and they found someone who's better than them. They'd go buy the company. But that 3-hour conversation with, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and if you haven't tried, it's something to see to believe. It's definitely worth giving it a try. It's awesome. So
today we did a couple roundtables and sessions with some of the picks and shovels of the AI revolution. A lot of emerging companies. Was there anything you saw here today that was kind of new and interesting?
So I think the thing that I really was blown away with and I'm super excited about is the hard technology. There's a lot of startups in the hard technology around foundation models and AI. That's deep chip engineering, training. Those are things which I think there's a most long-term opportunity for huge disruption. And again, we're very early, that's the theme of the day, but I was kind of impressed with how advanced the thinking was and how quickly we're moving in some of those areas.
Well, you're one of a handful of people here would probably understand what was Tenstrent, one of the companies, or the chip, the Canadian company. I sicked John Elby on that one to try and figure out what they're doing. It's so complex, and it was kind of fun. But there's some great deep technology here. And what are you personally most excited about in the next 3 to 5 years? I mean, I think it's fair to say you're on an upward trajectory at Microsoft. You've got a lot of attention from Satya and the executive team there. What will be success for you in this next couple of years with this project? I mean, I don't obviously looking for forward-looking comments or anything, but is it just bringing it all together, or is there a certain infusion of AI in every product at Microsoft, or what's kind of in your mind, defining this success in this part of your career?
Yeah, I would say Microsoft is definitely going to have AI in every product, and Satya very much saw this very early. It's super impressive. I would say the thing which is most interesting to me is that a lot of the application and product categories as they exist today, so things like communication tools and collaboration tools and CRMs and ERPs and CDP, a lot of these categories are going to get blurred together because of AI.
Yeah.
Because today you have to have a human go to a CRM and do a task, and a
Yeah.
human go and send email, and a human go and build a spreadsheet. You probably don't need to do that anymore once you have co-pilots in lots of these cases. So what are classic firewalls and gaps
Yeah.
between these things will get blurry, will get messy. So bringing together this idea of structured and unstructured work and core business data and
Right.
core productivity data, that is probably the great unknown, great challenge that we're super excited by.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I mean, so you take a CDP, a customer data platform, and say that's really a feature of this as opposed to another standalone.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that really redefines the future of software. I think many of you will look back on March of 2023, and you went to the Montgomery Summit. It's nice to have you all here, and you'll say, the subject that year, a number of subjects: data, cyber, fusion of technology throughout industries, the intersection of computational sciences and biology, computational sciences and climate change, revolution in financial technology. But you'll sit back and say, all right, underlying all this was an emergence of generative AI in just about every business processes in the world. And you'll look back and you'll be reading about Charles 5, 10, 20 years from now thinking, God, I was there. He looked like he was 20 years old, but he was smart as hell, and he explained it all to us, and I wish I'd listened, because, or at least I wish I'd understood it maybe. But because it's just fantastic to have you here. I think it's a seminal moment. The only way to really celebrate a seminal moment properly is to go have a drink. So after this session, the 5 o'clock, the bungalow is opening up. It's a great opportunity for our community to gather. Again, to wrap up the summit, we'll be there, and drinks on us, and plenty of food and drink for the next 2 hours from 5 to 7. And I thank you all for being here. Thank you for those who tuned in around the world. And Charles, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you.